My wife asked for a new entertainment center. That means other projects get pushed off to the side, the shop gets clean, and then we get nasty. And I shot this whole thing with the idea of doing a voiceover, so you get to listen to me this whole time. So the first thing we have to do is we have to build a box. Now to do that, we're going to grab some plywood and pull the table saw out and start ripping that plywood down into manageable 14-inch width sections. And since the table saw is out, I grabbed some 1x and I ripped down some facing material, ripped this down to 1.5 inches. Then grabbing the plywood, we run over to the miter station. You can see here I have a stop block. The saw not quite good enough to cut through the whole 14-inch section, so I cut once, flip it over, put it against the stop block, and I cut it back a second time. Then we head over back to the table saw to rip a groove down the side, and then I slide the fence just slightly over and run another groove. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to make it so that you don't see the edge of that backer board. Now, if you do it right, you don't have to do this next step, but I had a little bit of messiness on it, so I just quickly went, grabbed the chisel, and cleaned it up. If that doesn't make a lot of sense, here it is. You can see that edge of that backer board is going to be covered now, and you won't have to see that ugliness. A little selfless promotion here, but before we get to work, I gotta drop down my drop down work table. I do have a video of this on the channel if you are curious. Anyway, right, back to building here. So I'm building the base of it here. This thing's gonna be on a small little platform raised up. Using OSB, don't worry, you're not gonna see it. The whole thing gets glued and then nailed together with a little brad nailer. Now you can see the top, I'm just running 2 slats, and that's because we're going to do a solid top on there. I just need something to screw through. But once we have this thing nailed together, I actually go through and knowing where I'm going to cover later on, I use screws to really secure this thing up. But you got to make sure that you know that you're going to cover them, because if not, they're going to be a pain in the butt. To add the shelf, you can see I have spacers in there. Now I'm going to glue both sides of the shelf before I smear all the glue everywhere putting it in, because that's what happens. And then I'm going to nail through. Now a little trick here is you nail the top, and you see that square right there? Oh yeah, we're going to run that about 1/4 inch off for the side, and that'll allow me to nail all the way down and hopefully not miss any. Grabbing the track saw, we cut the back panel in one direction, and then we actually do my favorite band and we cut in the second direction. With the back panel cut, we start smearing some glue onto the back of the frame, smear it here, and we smear it everywhere. Then we take that back panel, we drop it into place, and once that panel is in, it's actually going to really help square up your piece as long as you cut the panel square, and it's going to strengthen it tremendously. So get this thing dropped in, and then I just go through with a nailer and I tack it all in. And get ready, because here comes the tip. So you can see I have that straight edge here. Now what I'm doing is I'm using the nails that nail that shelf in through the sides. I'm taking that straight edge and I'm lining it up on both edges and then putting it over about 1/4 inch. What that does, it allows me to run that nailer all the way through right up against that straight edge and put all those nails right in the back, hopefully, ideally, without missing. Once that thing has been nailed in though, I will go back through and again add some screws. You're not going to see these, it's going to be in the back, and it just adds a lot more than those finishing nails if something punches through the back. Now don't worry about all the exposed edges on the plywood. I'm going to face this thing, and what we're doing here is to take all those boards that I ripped down on the table saw earlier in the video. I'm cutting them all individually, gluing and nailing them all in to cover all those exposed edges. It's a very tedious process because you want to do this individually one at a time. Don't ever expect everything to be completely perfect. So I make sure I measure and cut everyone individually. Everything fits nice and snug and just covers up all those edges and gives it that finished little look. Okay, so the reason that my wife wants the new entertainment center is because if you've watched any of my videos, you've seen the dog crate cover that I built or the end tables that I built. Those are all in our living room, and it no longer matches the entertainment center that I built a long time ago. Now, that entertainment center that I built a long time ago in this big giant front area actually had 2 giant tip-out drawers, I guess you'd call them. But what I made those for, those were my kids' toy boxes. Now my kids are older, they don't really play with the toys anymore, unfortunately. So what we're gonna do in this big giant open section is we're gonna make one huge drawer that's gonna pull out, and that is gonna be for blankets. And on the top we will still have the 2 doors opening with glass inserts, and that's where I will put all the stuff for the TV, the electronics, all that kind of stuff. So first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to build the doors for up here, because I gotta get the glass ordered. So to do the doors, really easy. Measure from top to bottom, measure your overall opening, and I'm building 2. I'm gonna cut it in half and leave me a little bit of a reveal. Oh, and also what we're gonna do too is, if you saw those other videos, you know that we have like an X theme going on in all those. So the bottom is all white, the top is a nice thick top stained, and then there's X's. So I'll do 2 X's in the front and an X on each side. Now let's get some more wood. What I like to do, if I can, on doors like this is I like to use a stop block, cut your angle, run it to the stop block, and then cut again. This one, for some reason, I didn't do that. I just ran it to the stop block and then remeasured. I don't understand why. But whenever I cut these doors, what I do is you try to cut a little bit over and then work your way back so that all of your parts match up so your doors are square. I haven't figured out how to extend wood if you cut too much off yet, but once you figure that out, let me know. So I cut them long, measure it, cut it a little long, and then I go back through and I just kind of fine tune it till everything matches the exact same. Here I am showing you that I'm not crazy. I cut one side all the way through, flip the piece over, run it to the stop block. I told you I do use a stop block. Don't know why I didn't on that first part of the video, but here I am using it, so that is what I'd like to do to make sure that every piece is the same. Since all of my frames are going to have either recessed plywood or glass in them, we run over to the router table and I very carefully run all of those pieces through, leaving a groove in the back that'll be deep enough for either the glass or the plywood. So while I was doing the stuff for the doors up here, I went ahead and cut everything out for the face frame type situation for this bottom half with these 2 panels. This was something that I've never done before, because this one right here was just one solid piece, right? But it makes it look like there's 2 there. So now I'm gonna build the box for in here, that will, the big giant drawer that will come out. So before I start measuring, I gotta make sure that I leave room for my drawer slides. These drawer slides are rated for 100 pounds. I don't know how heavy this is going to be. I know we're only putting blankets in it, but material wise. So now we're gonna build a giant, the biggest drawer I've ever built in my life. Now building the drawer is basically the exact same thing as building the bigger box. We're just making it smaller. We're going to rip some plywood down over on the table saw. Then we're going to run over to the chop saw, and using the same flip around over method, I take it, make one cut, flip it over, make the other cut, and yeah, we're just literally building a box. With that drawer box built and installed, we go over to all the pieces that we already cut out, routed out, and I lay them all out to get them ready for assembly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some glue, dab some on, don't dab a lot on, that seems like too much, but we're going to put some glue on. Now we're going to line these things up, get the miters nice and solid and tight, take that finish nailer, put your hand exactly where you want the nail like an idiot, be very careful, close your eyes, and shoot a nail in there. Get it kind of nice and tight, and then just repeat the process in assembling the entire frames. This is where the grooves that we cut in the router table come into place. We're going to smear a bunch of glue into those grooves, and then we're going to take our back panels and we're going to put the panels inside those grooves. Hopefully everything matched up right. If you make the grooves after the frame is assembled, you're going to have some round edges to deal with, so that's why I do them ahead of time. That way everything is nice and square. Bang your panels in and then throw some nails in there. Now you kind of get the idea on what it's going to look like with those double fake doors, but we assemble the doors to the top the exact same way: glue, nails, try not to shoot yourself. This gives you an idea on what this thing's actually going to look like when it's all said and done. But before we put the X designs in, make sure that you sand the inside. It's way easier before the X's are in. Speaking of those X's, we're going to start to show you exactly how I do them, because they're awful to do. I take a board and I try to center the board on each corner, and then I kind of take the pencil and I look at it about 65 times, and I try to eyeball where that back piece comes up to make an intersecting piece right there. Ooh, there's a hand. I try to make the piece intersecting, and really this is kind of probably not a great way to do it, but this is the way that I do it. So you take them, you draw them, and then you go over to the chop saw and you follow the lines that you just randomly decided that that could be it. Set your angles and then cut them. And then you head back over to the thing
and you try to see if it fits, which it normally won't. So we're gonna put the camera down here, just like that, try to center us up. Yep, I'm giving you this in real time because it's pretty terrible. So then you come over and you look at it and you go, yep, that doesn't fit. Where do I gotta make more cuts at? So you look at it and you look at it some more. Then you bring yourself back over to the chop saw to make more cuts on it. And again, you're just taking a little bit off because I have yet to figure out how to add wood instead of taking it away. You kind of line it up with whatever mark you made, turn your back to the camera. Look at that nice hoodie. It says Nailed It Builds on there. You're going to grab it. Look angry because you are angry because this is terrible. Come back over to this thing and then you put your piece back on there. See if it fits. Does it fit? Drum roll. And it doesn't look like it fits again. So then you do the same thing. Make a little mark. Cut it back again. Bring it back over. Try it again. And this time it was close enough that I went over to the sander, which you can't really see, and I sanded it to get it to fit. And that's the way that I do each one, and it is awful. But now we got to do the X portion, which is that cross portion. So I take and I do the exact same thing. I cut another one to duplicate the exact one that I just had, and then I line them up and I try to mark all the intersecting parts, and then I just repeat the same process. It's chop saw, try to fit it, chop saw, try to fit it, notch it. It's the same thing, but then you got to make sure that they all line up and look good together. And once that's in, then you are in. But it is not fun. It took me almost an hour to do these, and then once they're in, see the little thumbs up, you take them, you pull them. See how they didn't want to come out? That's how tight it was. You're gonna throw some glue on there, smash it all in, and bring the nailer back over and nail it all in, and then thank God that you are done with this side. And then you remember that you have another side and more to do. But that's how I do it. Probably easier ways, but that's how I get it done. To not bore you, I'm not going to explain to you how I did these X's because it was literally the exact same way. It took forever, but in the end, I think that looks really nice. I know my wife was happy with the way that it looks. But now we go through and putty party. I'm going to putty all of the holes that I have from all of the nails. And while all of the putty dries up, I am able to start working on that actual thick top. I'm just using a 2x12 or 2x10 right here. I think it's 2x12. We're going to measure it, overcut it here because we're going to do a glue up, pull up on the saw, get it cut. I'm going to cut 2 of them, and then we're going to bring over to the table saw. I found out the overall width that I wanted, and then I divided so I would know how much to take off of each board. Really, I wanted to take stuff off because I want to remove that round over that the natural construction grade lumber comes with. So then my glue up will be nice, one solid piece. And obviously there wasn't enough room for the table saw, so I had to move it. Very highly recommend moving a table saw while it's running with a board in it. Safest thing you could probably do. Don't judge me. Like I said, we're going to do a glue up here, so I'm going to take some glue and I'm going to smear it all over one edge. I think I actually did it on both edges, but you really only have to do it on one edge. And I use a lot of glue here, like a lot. Like a lot. Look at this. Look how long I'm going for this. That's how much glue I put on there. Now, you need a lot of glue, but if I spread it, I probably wouldn't have had to put this much on. Now, when doing this kind of glue up, because I'm not using any dominoes or any doweling or anything like that to get my alignment right, this glue up has to have the alignment as close as possible. I don't have a planer to run this through that's that wide to get this thing to be exactly where I need it. So to avoid a lot of sanding, take your time at this point to try to get that alignment right. And I actually went through and had to reclamp this after I filmed this because I didn't like the alignment. And as you can see here, I'm struggling and I'm pounding on this thing with my fist to try to get it aligned right. But eventually I got it, and now we're going to take this thing out of clamps. And before I start working on sanding or finishing, I want to make sure that my drawer actually works well. So I throw a spacer down there to make sure that my drawer slides are at the exact same level. I put that in, and then I screw both drawer slides on. And then using a spacer underneath to get this drawer off of the bottom, I then take the drawer slides out, run them all the way to the edge, and I screw them into the edges. After the screws are in and it's holding itself, I remove the spacers from the bottom, and then I try to push it in, and it did work. Which is, see how impressed I am? Watch this, one finger, pulled it right out. This is an almost 4-foot wide drawer. Worked out really well. But then the weird thing is this weird guy got in the way of the camera. He had no idea. Look how unimpressed I am. kids these days. So once I got that done though, I got to add that front drawer front, and I use again a absolute ton of glue here. Like a lot of glue. Like it looks like I'm putting ketchup on my hot dog glue right here. Like there's a lot on there, but we need it because we need this thing to hold very well. So how I do this is I push this thing up, and then I'm going to actually take some little tiny cut off spacer pieces. See, I'm grabbing them right now, and I'm going to get this thing, and that's going to shim this in and give me the same reveal all the way around the drawer. I got one in, and the other one kind of went in really easily once you have the one in. Got this thing in. I wasn't sure how to secure this thing because I couldn't get back there and it was so big and wide. So I grabbed just the nailer and I started nailing through, making sure that I went into places where the nails were going to poke out through. Once I had it nailed in, I could remove those bottom spacer pieces if I could find them. I grabbed the one, looking for the other one. Probably shouldn't have opened the drawer first. And then it's in, and boom. Look at that. Beautiful fit. Opens up. Very nice and neat. Look at me. Look, I can't even believe it either. 2 fingers, 1 finger.
Alright, so the thing is all together and all puttied. I got the drawer slides in because that's what I was really concerned about, was making sure that everything fit right. So now it's just a matter of my favorite thing, which will be sand, and then unfortunately paint and stain everything. I got to sand all the components here and the top, and then make it colorful.
Now sanding is obviously awful and terrible. Now I only recorded this part without the mask. After I got this on, I turned the air purifier on, kicked my son out of the shop, and I put my mask on before I sanded. But after I did that, I realized there were some things that I actually forgot to do. Like one is, would take that top that I brought out of clamps earlier, and I forgot I had to put a round over with a router on all the way around it. And then I forgot to drill the holes through the back of the cabinet to allow for all of the cords to come through, so I drilled 2 holes in that. And then I also forgot that I needed to have a cover to cover all of the wires. So what this does is this sits in the cabinet, and you actually, all your extra wire sits behind it, so you don't have to look at those messy wires. Simple, easy thing to do, but it really makes a big difference. So then it was time to put some color on. I used a color called Dark Walnut on the top right here. I've used this on all the other things in the living room so it would all match. Taking some Hellman Spar Urethane. I actually ended up putting, I think, 4 coats of this on, and in between each coat you want to do a very light sand to make sure you clean everything up. And then we throw on, I did a coat of primer and then 2 coats of a white paint to make this thing all beautiful and do that 2-tone color that my wife really enjoys and likes. And at this point I thought everything was pretty much done and ready for final assembly. But then...
So I just came in, thought everything would be good to go, thought I could grab everything, do a finish assembly, and then put this thing in my house. And then I saw this. You can see right here these little 3 spots. What that is that is the plywood separating right there. If you look at it, you can see it all the way over here. So the option to fix that is I'm going to cut that out, Bondo it, and then have to repaint it, which sucks because, like I said, I thought this thing was like ready to be put together and be done, but I can't look at that every day while I'm watching TV because that's all I'll see. So I'm gonna cut that and Bondo it.
Now you're gonna be really lucky here because you're actually getting 2 tips in this video. The tip with this is when you're cutting it, go a little bit overboard because you want to make sure that you find a spot where the plywood layers are still really adhered to itself very well. I cut a little section out and then I had to keep going farther and farther until I was very confident that this wouldn't be a problem again. And with that crisis averted and that paint drying, it's time to put on the door pulls. So to do this, I just measure out exactly where I want them. Now I use a center punch on these, and what that does is that it really leaves a nice indent in the wood, which allows for that drill bit to find its hole very easily. And I always use a smaller drill bit at first because again, it's easier for that smaller drill bit to get into that center punched hole. I drill with that smaller drill bit, and then I go over to the bigger bit, which allows for the actual screw to go all the way through to get into that pole. To make sure that the hinges don't look weird, I use a spacer block you can see on the top. I use it on the top and the bottom. That makes sure that my hinges are obviously the same distance from the top and the bottom. Pretty simple. Attaching the glass to the inside here, usually what you want to do is use a screw, and I like to use a plastic washer, but at this point I didn't have any plastic washer, so I did something really stupid and I used a metal washer. So all I'm doing is I'm just taking a screw and a metal washer, going close to the glass. You don't want to touch the edge of the glass with the metal because it will explode, trust me. This is actually the stuff that I kind of do for a living, is working with glass, so I know how stupid this is. I should have went out and just got plastic washers. You could also just silicone this thing in there, but because I got kids, I wanted to make sure it was going to really stay. Not the smartest way to do it, but it got it done. Now it's assembly time. I take that top and I measure both sides to make sure that the piece is centered on there, and then I just go through and I screw from underneath to get that top on, and then bring it finally inside. And I'm actually using business cards on this in between my doors to make sure that all of my spacing is correct on these. I screw one door in, put the business cards in, screw the other door in. Very simple, very basic. It's a trick I picked up from other people on YouTube to make sure that my reveal is correct. And then we just pop that drawer right into those drawer spaces, and then this thing is done.
That's going to wrap this one up. Thanks for watching.